Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith. I'm very excited for the show today. I have former member of European Parliament, Ben Habib, who's also a great British patriot and a friend. So, very excited to have him on. So, I'm going to bring him up now. Ben, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you, Don. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's great to see you. How are things going your way?
Um, how are things going? At what level? At a personal level, things are more or less all right, but at a national level,
Uh,
clearly they're not.
A little bit different, man. You've been really busy since the last time we spoke. You've started a new party. You've been all over seen you on a lot of podcasts. So you've been really busy. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I've known for a long time, and I think you would have guessed last time we spoke that the United Kingdom needs a new political force. I knew that that's what was required, but I wasn't certain that there was appetite for it
Hmm.
because Reform UK was riding so high. It was the alternative to, the Unit Party, the legacy parties. But when Rupert Lowe was thrown out of the party in the way that he was, which some Americans may not, I'm sure most Americans don't know who Rupert Lowe is, but he's a former colleague of mine who was a member of Parliament with Nigel Farage,
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
decent, good human being, and he was thrown out of Reform ignominiously and accused of having threatened the chairman of Reform, a chap called Zia Youssef, with bodily harm, and a police complaint was made against him, and he was accused also of bullying members of his staff in his office. And Reform tried to destroy him when they removed him from the party, and
Hmm.
that the falsity of the accusations made against him was so clear that lawfare was being used to try and destroy Rupert Lowe that I think it opened up a gap in the British people's psyche that actually a new party is needed. Reform is not what it had hoped to be, what they had hoped to be, and what it said it would be on the tin.
Hmm.
And so with that opportunity, I decided, in conjunction with Rupert Lowe, that I would structure a new political party. It's a very
Hmm.
difficult thing in the United Kingdom, as you might know, Don. Our politics moves incrementally. It's not revolutionary or dynamic. It moves very incrementally. To set up a
Hmm.
new party and to make a success of it is requires quite a lot of application and a lot of good luck, and requires the people to be in a particular place.
Hmm.
And so it's quite a task that we've taken on. But what's been remarkable is that within a month of launch, actually, we've become the seventh largest party in the United Kingdom,
Hmm.
after the Scottish National Party, which is a wretched party in my mind. But anyway, we're the seventh largest within a month of having launched. And what that says to me is that actually I was right. Not only is there a need for a new political party, but actually the people really do want it. And
Hmm.
so I think that we will be a political force with which the establishment is going to have to reckon.
Hmm. Right. Um, well, I think you're a heck of a guy. So I think any party that has anything to do with you is gonna stand for freedom and liberty. So I want to go back to something you were talking about with Zia and Rupert because there was a lot of bluster coming from Zia's side of that thing. You heard him talking a lot about it. Rupert, being the gentleman he is, he didn't really go into a lot of detail, but you could really tell that the theatrics were coming from the reform side of that. What actually happened in that case? Because I have a feeling my feeling on that whole thing was it was a lot less than what was coming from uh, than what Zia said it was. So do you know much about that? What actually happened in that uh, I guess incident between
Yeah,
the two
so
of them?
the only way I can describe it, Don, is that it was a fabrication. There was no truth to
Hmm.
the allegation
Hmm.
made by Zia Youssef that he had been threatened, physically threatened, uh, mortally physically threatened by Rupert Lowe, who is a 67-year-old MP, having had, a distinguished career in business. He ran Southampton Football Club. He's never
Hmm.
had a single thing against, no black mark against him throughout his entire career. And then all of a sudden, because there's a fallout effectively between Farage and Rupert Lowe, and we can come
Hmm.
back to that if you like.
Hmm.
An accusation, a false accusation, is made that he was threatened. And for people who are listening to this and watching the show and thinking, well, maybe Ben is a bit biased, the complaint that Zia Yusuf made to the police in March 2025 was in relation to an apparent incident where he was threatened in December 2024. Now, if you were really threatened, you would have made the complaint straight away. You wouldn't wait all that time, would
Right.
you? And that was the acid test in my mind as to whether there was any validity here or not. And I mean, none of it rang true. But of course, if it's 3 months late, then it's obviously bogus, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, and the links they went as well to seemingly try to embarrass Rupert Lowe. They went to his house and confiscated his guns. Guy lives on a farm, as I understand it, far away from the city. Uh, how is that even possible that you can, a member of parliament that can go and confiscate his guns over what, really what amounts to a disagreement between party members?
Well, I mean, Rupert Lowe had the accusation made against him that he threatens their use of with physical violence, mortal danger. So the
Hmm.
police use that either as an excuse or legitimately to go and confiscate Rupert's guns. Rupert does have an extraordinary collection of guns. He's a
Hmm.
great hunting, shooting
I'd like to
guy,
see it.
and I think
I'm a
he's
gun
got
guy,
30.
so.
He's got I think he's got. Well, I think most Americans are more gun guys than we are. And
Yeah.
anyway, he's got 31 guns. So it took the police a few hours to, collect everything and make sure they've got everything and then drive off. And of course, Rupert also wanted a record of the guns that were going because some of them are heirlooms. Some of
Hmm.
them go from generation to generation in a family, and they're
Hmm.
not just guns; they're part of the family, if that
Sure.
makes sense. So
Oh, sure.
I'm
We do
sure
that
you
here. We
appreciate
pass
that in
we
the
pass
US.
guns down. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I understand that 100%. What do you think sets you apart from, reforms? I guess they're pretty popular. To me, it seems like, looking outward in, it seems to me like their popularity is starting to dwindle now, just based on what I've seen in some of the recent in social media and mainstream media. What would set your party, Advance UK, apart from a party like Reform? What do you see as the differences there and the strengths in Advance UK versus a Reform party?
So fundamentally, reform doesn't have a political philosophy. Nigel Farage has the persona of an individual who stands for the United Kingdom, for borders, for sovereignty, for independence, for small state, for low taxation, for reducing the welfare state, for the promotion of the working and middle class. But the reality is that's not true when it comes down to the man himself. That's his persona. Nigel Farage is what I would call the ultimate political expedient. And you and I discussed this at some length the last time we spoke. And I
Mhm.
was saying Nigel Farage needs to develop the courage to go over the top of the hill and to take on the establishment and not to take the easy route. Do you remember?
I
And
do.
the easy route. The easy route is the politically expedient one, bending this way or that way to curry favor with whomever it is you're trying to engage at the time. And in the pursuit of power, Farage is basically throwing all the principles which underpin his persona under a bus. So, for example, he has recruited into his party, and it seems to me that anyone who was either a former member of the Conservative Party or a former disgraced member of the Conservative Party is welcome to join Reform. The very people who actually delivered the country into the problems we now face are rapidly joining Reform.
Mhm.
People who stood in favor of the European Union. And remember, the battle in politics in the US, the battle in politics in Europe and the United Kingdom is the battle between those of us who believe in our country and those of us who believe in governance through supranational institutions, the liberal global order. And Farage, the persona of Farage is anti the global order. But actually, he's recruiting into his ranks people who are pro it. So he just took
Mhm.
on Jake Berry, who is a former chairman of the Conservative Party, who voted to stay in the EU in 2016, was pro lockdown, was is pro net zero. You know, all these kinds of policies that are so evidently anti nation state. And there are lots of
Mhm.
other examples, alongside Jake Berry. And the policies that Nigel Farage is coming out with, the things he's saying, no longer resonate with his persona. So, you know, you think of him as this man who stands for the United Kingdom, but actually he's on the record saying he doesn't care about the rate of demographic change in the country. It's an impossible task to deport all illegal migrants, so he's not even going to try to do it. That Islam is going to become a dominant religion in the United Kingdom, so we mustn't politically alienate Islam. We must somehow make peace with it. He's not against halal. He would consider, perhaps Americans don't know the name of this lady that I'm about to mention, but he would consider the repatriation of Shamima Begum
Mm-mm.
from Syria to the United Kingdom. Now, this is a woman who left the United Kingdom, admittedly, when she was quite young, but she went and joined ISIS. She was responsible for aiding and abetting the death of millions of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, and yet we Sajid Javid, who was the chancellor of, who was the sorry, he was the Home Secretary at the time, managed to remove nationality from Shamima Begum, leaving her as an outcast. And rightly so, because she was a member of ISIS. Nigel Farage was on the record a few months ago saying he would consider having her back in the country. But he's all over the place. He doesn't
Mhm.
stand for the persona you think he is. And he will, as I say, pivot one way or the other way to curry favor with people. Advance UK is the antithesis of Nigel Farage. We believe in nation state in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in all its parts and for all its people, recognizing our Christian constitutional heritage. Number one. Number two, we believe in freedom of speech. We're not going to cancel people in our party just because they tweeted something silly 3 or 4 years ago, which is habitually taking place
Mhm.
in reform. We stand for democracy. So we stand against the supranational order, all the international laws and organizations that prohibit us from doing what's right
Mhm.
and beneficial to the national interest. Nigel
Mhm.
Farage isn't there. He's happy to make peace with the supranational order. And then we
Mhm.
stand for equality under the law. Everyone must be judged as if Lady Justice, as she should be, is blind. And Nigel Farage uses lawfare, as we saw against Rupert Lowe. And so, even though the principles of Advance UK are self evidently correct, and you would expect actually every politician across the globe to say the same about their own countries, believe in your country, believe
Mhm.
in freedom of speech, believe in democracy and equality under the law. Very few Western countries are now practicing that thesis, the United States being a notable exception. Um, and and Nigel Farage doesn't practice it, but Advance UK
Mhm.
will, and we will not bend. We will absolutely stand our ground, Don. We are not going to bend on our principles. And we are going to carry the British people with our vision, with our thesis. We are not going to be led by what we think is popular. We're going to try and lead with what we believe to be right
Mm.
For the British people.
You know, I think that's really the kind of tough policies and that the British people need to hear. When you hear folks like Nigel say that it can't be done, when it talks about deporting all the illegal immigrants and things like, all you really have to do is look to the United States. They said that about the United States here as well, and look what happened. We had 10,000 per day illegal immigrants coming in under Joe Biden's watch. Trump came in, and last month we had zero
Yeah. I mean,
with
that's
his with
amazing.
his with his strong immigration policy. So it can be done. So it's just a matter
Yeah.
of someone coming in who really truthfully wants to do it. And it sounds to me like you are that person, or you represent that those types of that sentiment at least. How would you go about getting rid of illegal immigration in your country?
So at the moment, we have a government and a political class hijacked by the notion that people coming from France are genuine refugees. They've forgotten that they're already safe in France, and they ascribe to them all the protection required for someone fleeing from a genuine war zone. So
Hmm.
people trying to break into our country, to break our immigration law, they're regarded as Keir Starmer describes them as irregular migrants. He won't even call them illegal migrants. And he affords them all the protection of our Human Rights
I think
Act,
Keir Starmer's
which is,
irregular.
yeah, he's irregular. And he affords them all the protection of the Human Rights Act, which is the embodiment in British law of the European Convention of Human Rights. And so these people effectively are welcomed into the United Kingdom. When they enter our territorial water, they are put on our border force boats, which should really be called a border taxi service. They're given a warm
Mhm.
blanket, a cup of tea, a Kit Kat. If you had, do you have Kit Kats in the States? I'm sure you
Oh
do.
yeah, oh yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
I don't eat it
and they're
anymore,
brought.
but back in the day, I enjoyed them quite
But
frequently.
that's literally what they're given: a cup of tea, a Kit Kat, a warm blanket. They're brought back to British shores, escorted straight away to a four-star hotel, given free food, free medical care, free dental care, cash in their pockets, an iPad, an interpreter in case they can't understand English, which most of them can't, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. We are laying out the red carpet for illegal migrants. We're saying, come to the United Kingdom, it's open season on the UK. We won't put our citizens' interests first. We're going to put your interests first. So these people are coming
Hmm.
in droves. And the way we have to fix that is to, first of all, repeal the Human Rights Act, which affords the kind of ridiculous notion that these people are genuine refugees when they're not. They're coming from
Hmm.
France. We have to repeal it. It also prevents us from enforcing our borders. So once we've repealed it, we enforce our borders in the channel. Now, you might have heard it said, Don. I certainly heard this repeatedly when I was growing up, that the channel protected the United Kingdom. For
Hmm.
centuries, it protected the United Kingdom. But now, under the Human Rights Act and the European Convention of Human Rights, it's become our Achilles heel. Anyone who puts themselves in danger in the channel, it becomes our obligation automatically under the European
Hmm.
Convention. We have to rescue
Hmm.
them, bring
Right.
them to our shores, and look after them. And so that has to go. The generous treatment that they get, which is effectively under the blanket of progressive discrimination, all ethnic minorities, all disadvantaged peoples must have the full protective blanket of the United Kingdom, irrespective of the fact that our veterans, our elderly, our pensioners are repeatedly thrown under the bus economically. There's no
Hmm.
protection afforded to those who are sleeping rough and who are, of British origin. But these people are given huge progressive benefits. And so that
Hmm.
has to stop. And I think if you welcomed these people, well, first of all, if you stop these people in the channel to the maximum extent possible, and those that managed to make it onto shore were welcomed with imprisonment and armed guards with
Hmm.
swift deportation thereafter, as you said, it would stop overnight. And that's what an incoming advanced UK government would do. It would
Hmm.
take the necessary steps to make it absolutely clear to people who wish to break into our country that you are not welcome and we will not roll out the red carpet for you. You will be treated as the criminal that you are, and you will be put under lock and key, probably in camps, because
Hmm.
actually we haven't got the prison cells available. So we've got to take the kind of action that will deter these people from coming in the first place. And the action that I've just described would stop it in its
Hmm.
tracks.
How do you how do you break away from the European Union or the ECHR and all the things that bind you to these agreements where you have to accept the? How do you do that? How do you break away without Parliament? Because I mean, it seems to me logistically nearly impossible to get Parliament to vote on such a thing. So how do you break away from that so that legally, I guess legally, you don't have a responsibility to take these folks in?
So we can in the UK, with a majority in Parliament, an incoming pro-British government would, with a majority, be able to do anything it wants.
Mhm.
That is the nature of British law. It could
Mhm.
repeal the Human Rights Act. It should repeal also the Equalities Act, which creates this progressive discrimination in favor of minorities. In fact,
Mhm.
an incoming government, its sole purpose, I think, in government will be to repeal just about every single law that's been
Mhm.
passed since Tony Blair came into office. We have to
Right.
restore we have to restore the constitutional framework that had protected the United Kingdom for so long, and in the last 3 decades has been set aside. We have to repeal all that damaging legislation. And having repealed it, we would then have the authority to set aside the Human Rights Act, and we would have to tell the European Union that we're terminating the treaties that we've got with you. Now, the
Hmm.
European Union will react as it always does in a belligerent fashion. It will try it will try to damage our economy. And then it becomes critical, Don, that if we end up in a trade war with the EU because it doesn't like the policies that we're adopting that are pro British, we will have to be in a position to deregulate, to ditch net zero, reduce taxes on our businesses so that our economic engine can cope with and indeed will prevail over the European
Hmm.
Union's attack on our economy. You know,
Hmm.
if we ditch net zero and our energy costs drop, if we ditch all the regulations that have been foisted on business, the working and middle classes, and our costs associated with complying with regulations evaporate, if we um, if we reduce taxes and make it more profitable to be in the
Hmm.
United Kingdom as a business, which, by the way, we can come back to when we talk about Trump. If you do those three things, then you will be able to fight back against the EU and you will prevail over them. You know, one of the things we've forgotten as a country, Trump absolutely gets it. One of the things we've forgotten as a country is that international trade is not a kumbaya, come here, let's all hug and get on with each other. International trade is inherently competitive.
Hmm.
And we've given up our competitive edge in so many areas in this country. You would have heard it said correctly that we've deindustrialized on the back of ideological agendas, mostly net zero and things like that. We've deindustrialized. But in order to be competitive on the international stage, to take on the EU, to take on other countries that compete with us, we must put the promotion of our own industries first. We shouldn't be putting ideologies first. So I think we can ditch the ECHR, we can ditch the Equalities Act, we can reverse back to where we were in 1996 from a regulatory, legislative, and constitutional perspective. But we must also then be ready economically to protect ourselves and challenge those that would try and punish us because we've done what's right for the country.
Hmm. Is that something that can also be done? Because to me, just looking at the state of affairs in the UK right now, and the likelihood you're going to get a majority of Parliament who aren't globalists who are going to, vote to leave the European Union and all these agreements you have with them. Is there can this be put to a national vote? Is that something that's even
So
possible?
that, I mean, but Don, that's why reform isn't the answer. And that's why
Hmm.
something new is needed, because reform is
Hmm.
taking on all the same people that believe in the kind of international agenda that we've just been discussing. And
Hmm.
you need a new body of people. You need a new body of people who believe in this country, who understand what's required to be done in order to make the United Kingdom independent and to do it prosperously.
Hmm.
There will be headwinds to start with. There will undoubtedly be headwinds. There will be economic damage done in the first instance, as there was in the
Hmm.
States. When
Hmm.
Trump first did his tariffs and so on, there was a bit of the markets wobbled, the economy wobbled a bit, but it's already coming right, isn't it? You can
Yes, it
already
is.
see
It's killing
America
it.
is
Yeah.
beginning, it's already emerging. And so
Yeah.
what we mustn't fear is fear. We must take these steps boldly, and we can do it through Parliament if we have a new body of people who all subscribe to the same political philosophy, which is why
Hmm.
you need something like Advance UK. And
Hmm.
the next government, I'll just say a couple of other things before I finish on this point. The next British government is going to be a pro British government. Whether it's Advance UK or a combination of Advance UK and something else or whatever, the next British government's going to be a pro British government. It is also
Hmm.
going to get a thumping majority. And if we have President Vance in the White House at that time, we will have the patrician protection of the United States for the agenda that we wish to deliver. President Vance at the time will be delighted by a resurgent United Kingdom. We know that the Trump administration wants the UK back on its feet. It sees the UK as a mechanism by which Western civilization itself can be settled. And if we have a majority in Parliament, which I believe a pro-British government will have, and we have the petition umbrella, if you like, of the United States of America, we will do what's needed, and the EU will be in a very weak position. Look at the EU now; it had to swallow the tariffs that are being imposed on it by Trump.
Hmm.
It was all muscling up and saying we're going to fight back, but it took the knee in the end, and we just need that kind of approach.
Hmm. No, I totally agree with you. You know, they say I don't know if you agree with this or not. That the U.S. kind of leads, and the rest of the world follows. So,
Absolutely.
I think we're starting to see that, just glimmers of that. So I hope that's the case. Um, but I want to talk about something else real quick, 'cause it's just shocking to me, and maybe you
Yeah.
can comment on this. Over 100,000 Afghans were flown into Britain without any parliamentary debate at a cost of $7 billion to taxpayers, and nobody knew a thing about it. How does that happen?
So this goes back to the same root causes that prohibits us from protecting our own borders. So the story here is that 23,600 or 20,000, sorry, 23,900 Afghans,
Uh-huh.
who, by the way, were in Pakistan, they weren't in Afghanistan, they were in
Hmm.
Pakistan, applied for asylum to the United Kingdom for various reasons.
Hmm.
Many of them had had their asylum applications refused because some of them were criminals, some of them didn't qualify.
Hmm.
And then there was a leak by the Ministry of Defense. I think it was a former soldier who inadvertently leaked their identities. And this is the point at which everything went wrong. The government decided that it would effectively expand the remit of the European Convention of Human Rights and not just apply it to people in this country, but would apply it to the 23,900 Afghans living in Pakistan. So
Hmm.
they internationalized the scope of domestic British law. And they said, right, we're going to apply this to these 23,900 Afghanis. And we are going to give all of them asylum in the UK because we fear now that if Pakistan sends them back to Afghanistan, they will be punished by the Taliban. And oh, if if we don't protect their family members as well, they too might be subjected to abuse by the Taliban. So they should be allowed to bring all their families with them, which, by the way, is also something that's encouraged by the European Convention of Human Rights. It says that everyone's entitled to a family life. And then the British judge is looking at this, and of course, the European Convention is really badly drafted because it's just meant to be a convention. It's not meant to be applied rigorously as law. And
Hmm.
the British judges looked at this and said, well, there's no definition, no clear definition of family. So we don't know how to interpret what a family is. A family could be your wife, it could be your blood relatives, your relations, your extramarital affairs, or
Hmm.
whatever, right?
Hmm.
And in one instance, we had one Afghan bring 22 family members with him. So the 23,900 people became 100,000 people. And,
Unbelievable to me.
uh, and this is the setting aside of the interests of our country and sacrificing them on the altar of a ridiculous ideology. And I just want to say again, these people were not in Afghanistan. They were already out of the reach of the Taliban. They
Hmm.
were in Pakistan. And a deal could easily have been done with Pakistan to say, look, we made a mistake. Here's a few thousand quid per head. Make sure that they're kept safe. You
Hmm.
deal with the issue. And
Hmm.
instead, we took it's 7 billion quid, by the way, which is more like $10 billion to bring these people to this country. But also the cultural damage, the damage that's done culturally by bringing people who come from such an alien culture. And this might sound offensive to some people that I would regard people from the depths of Afghanistan as having an alien culture to us, but it shouldn't offend you. It is true. We are the product. The US is the product of hundreds of years of evolution. We're the product of thousands of years of evolution.
Hmm.
Cultural evolution, which
Right.
comes from Christian roots, and their evolution is different to ours. And to
It's
bring
not
these people
democratic at
over
all.
here
That's right.
wholesale, it's not, and then just
No.
shove them on the British people. And everyone knew in government that what they were doing was awful. So they got a
Hmm.
super injunction from the court shutting up all knowledge of what they were up to, which
Hmm.
tells you. Two things. It tells you the British government knew that what they were doing was deeply unpopular with the people and therefore undemocratic. And it also tells you that the British government was in opposition to the people because it willfully did something under
Mhm.
using lawfare effectively to defeat democracy. This is how
Mhm.
bad things have become in this country.
No, I totally agree. And the biggest problem, it'd be great if folks from predominantly Muslim countries would like to come to democratic nations, Western countries, and assimilate. But what they do is they come over and they form these parallel societies, basically, where they don't assimilate, they don't integrate, and which it creates a lot of havoc, especially in nations who are Christian, like the UK, like the United States. So it creates a wall
And Don,
there.
we're
Yeah.
guilty. We're guilty. We're guilty of that, by the way, because what we say to these people when they come to this country, whether they're Hindu, Muslim, atheist, whatever, what we say to them is, we respect your culture. We wish you to practice your culture in our country. We are
Hmm.
going to put a protective blanket around you and your rights. We will promote you into work. We will make sure that you get housing ahead of British citizens. We will make sure that your culture, your people, your beliefs are absolutely promoted and celebrated in our country. We
Hmm.
create the silos to which you've just described. Instead of saying, which is what we should be saying, it's a privilege to come to our country. We are a Christian country. We don't care what religion you are. We're a Christian country. You have to adapt to our culture. You have to subscribe to our values. You have to swear allegiance to king and country, etc. Instead of doing that, we do the opposite. We say we will stand aside. We will set aside our principles, our beliefs, our value, our culture in your promotion.
Hmm.
We've created this problem.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, they get extra rights, apparently. They don't get equal
Yeah,
rights, they get extra
completely.
rights. In that same vein, I watched a clip from one of your recent conversations where you talked about Starmer wanting to move, and I think this kind of falls along the lines of parallel societies, Islam and Christianity. Starmer wants to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords, which is the 26 Church of England bishops who are allowed to sit and vote. I believe is that correct? He wants to remove that, which is kind of an ancient
He-
custom within Parliament, right?
yeah, so this is a really evil move by Starmer. So the very delicate constitutional setup we had in the United Kingdom made Parliament, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, our elected body of representatives in the Commons and those in the Lords who are not elected, the collective constitutional guardians of the United Kingdom. And that guardianship and that supreme authority that they had included our constitutional Christian roots, which is the bishopric, and it included our law lords, which was because the House of Lords had been the supreme adjudicating body in the United Kingdom. And it worked extremely well, Don, because that was our system. Parliament made the laws, but it was also the supreme adjudicator of the laws, and it was our Christian constitutional guardian through the bishopric. Tony Blair removed the law lords from the House of Lords and created the Supreme Court, what he calls a separation of powers. Actually,
Hmm.
what he did was to create what he did with the creation of the Supreme Court was a competing power. The Supreme Court is often making up law
Hmm.
as it goes along. It's creating law,
Just
and
creating
we
law, yeah.
see that. It's creating law. So we've got a competing creator of laws and implementer of laws in the United Kingdom. And now he wants to remove the bishopric, which would remove our constitutional Christian roots. And then it'll be a hop and a skip for him to say we are a multi-faith country,
Mm.
that we're no longer a Christian country. And that's what he wants to do it for, because the minute he takes the bishopric out of the House of Lords, we're no longer constitutionally a Christian country. And
Hmm.
we've already got the King of England, King Charles, saying that he is a multi faith leader. He's not. Constitutionally, I'm afraid, King Charles, you're wrong. You're head of the Church of England, and
That's right.
he's forgotten his role.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to bring up King Charles, but I'm glad you did anyway. You talked about when it comes to your party, Rupert Lowe has his movement. What was Rupert's the name of his movement again? I'm slipping my mind right now.
Restore Britain.
restore Britain. He's got his movement. You've got
Yeah.
your party. You guys are kind of I guess, working together there, and to some degree. There's another movement, a huge movement in the United Kingdom called Unite the Kingdom movement. You've probably seen clips and stuff online. Hundreds of thousands of people have shown up to these demonstrations. What I'm going to put you on the spot here for just a minute. What Because I know a lot of these folks personally, and they're big supporters of yours and Rupert's. Are folks like that welcome in your party, and even in Rupert's movement, if they want to do a sort of a cross movement, do you think they'd be welcome?
I don't know if Rupert has any rules and regulations that would prohibit them from joining his movement. I
Hmm.
absolutely doubt it. Rupert
Hmm.
is of like mind with me on
Hmm.
these issues. But uniquely, again, in British politics, one of the rules that I've set, the constitution of Advance UK, the party that we've launched, which by the way I constructed with Rupert. Rupert and I constructed Advance UK together.
Hmm.
He just decided late on in the process that he didn't think a party was wanted by the British people. It wasn't the right time for it. I think he's
Hmm.
wrong. I don't think the people need another movement. We've got lots of movements. What we need is a political force, and the only way to do that is through a party. But one of the differentiating characteristics of our party, Advance UK, is that we will not police our membership at all. Anyone who is a British citizen and is on the electoral roll in the United Kingdom and is not a member of another political party is free to join Advance UK. We are not going to police what they believe. We're not going to police what they said on Twitter a few years ago. We're not going to be throwing them under a bus because they said something with which we disagree. If you have
Hmm.
the right to vote, you've got the right to join a political party, in my mind. And there's been far too much. It comes back to this freedom of speech concept. You
Hmm.
can't be saying we stand for the democratic principle as a part as a political party, and yet we're going to police all our membership. And the minute someone says something we don't like, we're going to throw them under a bus. That's not
Hmm.
freedom of speech. That's not
Right.
democracy. And
Right.
anyone who wishes to join the Advanced UK Party is welcome, as long as they're a British citizen on the electoral roll and not a member of another political party. And by the way, no one is a member of Reform. They don't have genuine members. So if you think you're a member of Reform and you want to join Advance UK, you can, because actually you're not a genuine member of Reform.
Yeah, it was you who educated me on that. But it's very refreshing that you said that. And I think the reason I asked you that is because of the comment that
Yeah.
Richard Tice made about we don't want Tommy Robinson and his lot. Well, his lot is millions of people. I hate to tell Tice, so I think he turned a lot of people off when he said that. But it's so refreshing that you don't have that same mentality, that you're willing to accept anybody as long as they're,
Yeah,
on.
but Don, think about it for a second. Let's just reflect on it for a second. Why we're in politics in ostensibly a democracy. We wish to garner support of the people. We wish to get people's votes. Why would you categorize a whole load of to all intents and purposes, as far as I'm aware, entirely law-abiding British citizens? Why would you categorize them as that lot and say we don't want your votes? Why would you say
It's not smart, is it?
to a large proportion of the British public, we don't want your support?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the smartest thing. Could you
No.
just for a moment educate and a lot of British people maybe may already know this, and just explain to our audience the structure, what you explained to me before. You and I had a private conversation about this, the structuring of Reform UK, and how it all went about and what it actually means.
So Reform UK had started as a company limited by shares, which I'm sure is, Americans are very familiar with. And there were 15 shares, nine of which were owned by Nigel Farage. So he was the de facto controller of Reform. And I fought a campaign to democratize Reform, because I knew that the only way to try and keep Nigel Farage in check and to make sure actually that there were the checks and balances and processes in place that would allow Reform to attract very capable people into the party and therefore into government. You need a proper democratization, a proper constitution for the party. So I campaigned very hard that Nigel Farage should give up his shareholding, that it should be democratized, the members should control the party, and there should be checks and balances in place within the party. And Farage and Youssef, because they are now a pair, they're like the matrimonial couple of Reform UK. They go wherever they go together. And so they obviously had some pillow talk about how they were going to handle this. And they decided over the course of their pillow talk that they
Oh,
would
that's funny.
they,
That's good.
well, that they would do. This is what they did, and that they would try and hoodwink the British people by saying they've
Oh.
democratized. They came up with a constitution which basically gives all power to Nigel Farage. It has a board of
Hmm.
directors, um, which can decide on a vote of no confidence in the leader, Nigel Farage being the
Hmm.
leader, and the vote and the board of directors. Guess what? Don is mostly appointed by Nigel Farage, so there's no accountability.
It really is unbelievable to me the setup that
You
guy
know.
has with that party. It's. And do you think most people are aware of just really how this party is set up the way it is?
I think people. I don't know if I mean I think I made it pretty. The campaign I fought was pretty rigorous, and I think
Uh-huh.
it revealed for a lot of people. But a lot of people also think, Don. To be fair to people, is like we've had enough of the Conservatives, we've had enough of Labour. To hell with the structure of reform. We're just going to back reform because we need a change. We need a
Hmm.
change. And um, just as an aside, it's quite interesting. There have been a few polls that have taken place where they've polled the various political parties in the UK, but they've also given people the opportunity to choose none of the above. And in the
Hmm.
polls where none of the above was an option, most people went for none of the above. So it's not as if reform is very popular.
Hmm.
It's the only choice. If you're sick of Tories and you're sick of Labour, it becomes the de facto default choice. But Advance
Hmm.
UK is going to change that.
Well, I shall certainly hope so, and I think it definitely breathes a breath of fresh air into British politics. Um, so yeah, I'm hoping you can make some changes and make some headway. It looks like you're doing a pretty good job already, no longer than your party has, been created.
Yeah, we're doing really well. So in order to test my own theory that a political party, there was political room for a political party, there was room for a new party. I set a hurdle of 30,000 members before we actually become a registered political party. And within 4 or 5 weeks, we've already reached half that number nearly.
Hmm.
And that's remarkable. As I said, we're the seventh largest party now in the United Kingdom, ahead of parties that have existed for decades. We've leapfrogged all of them. And it's because the people want a genuinely pro British party for which to vote. They want a party that will unashamedly stand for the national interest, that will get rid of the nonsense that's been taking place for the last 30 years, bring back the concept of a proud, independent, prosperous United Kingdom, run
Hmm.
for all parts of the United Kingdom and for all the people of the United Kingdom. It's a
Hmm.
basic concept, but it hasn't been delivered for decades.
Right. I want to move on to another topic here because I had a friend this past weekend who was arrested by British police because he called pedophiles who also happened to be foreigners. He called them foreign filth, I believe was the term he used in that context, referring to the pedophiles. Well, the police came and arrested. His name's James Harvey. I don't know. Did you see that arrest?
I
This
didn't see
this
it, no.
Okay, James is an activist, 22, 23 year old. Like I said, he's a friend of mine. I know the guy very well. He's a good kid. Um, you look at cases like James Harvey, Lucy Conley, Jordan Parler, who were arrested for either social media posts or speaking out at demonstrations. And then you see the flip side of that, where you see people who are either immigrants or Muslim who commit actual violence, physical violence, who are given no jail time. Why is that happening in the UK, and what would advanced UK do to change that?
Well, again, I'm afraid I have to repeat myself. The root causes of these issues are in the two acts of parliament that I've already mentioned, the Human Rights Act, which effectively, i- in the pursuit of trying to equate all of humanity and forgetting that British citizens actually should have a privileged existence in Britain, it's a
Hmm.
quaint concept that your citizenry affords you certain privileges.
Hmm.
They've set that aside. And then, of course, they've practiced mass migration coupled with positive progressive discrimination through the Equalities Act and the regulations and other laws that follow the Equalities Act. So we've got to a position now where if you're from an ethnic minority and you've come to this country, even if you're a criminal, you will receive the protective blanket. The institutions themselves are so fearful of calling you out because the institutions would then be denounced as being racist or not adhering to the regulatory framework that's been foisted on them through this progressive discrimination and so on, that they will hide it. But there's also something more sinister than that going on. And
Hmm.
that is that a lot of the people that we brought to this country, who are antipathetic to this country, who have been allowed to continue practicing their antipathetic approach to the country, have now got themselves into positions of influence, into
Hmm.
positions of authority,
Hmm.
into trade bodies, into the police, into social services, into our local community services, NHS, etc. And they are purveying their ideologies now through those institutions. And, just going to the rape gangs for a minute, I'm sure your viewers would have heard of the awful um, ignominy that has befallen the United Kingdom, the
Hmm.
absolute tragic and horrendous rape of young, white, working class girls. A lot of these girls were taken um, from places of care. They had been put into care homes because they came from broken homes, they didn't have parents or whatever. And the people who were in charge of the care homes were predating on them. They were
Hmm.
using them they were putting them forward to the
Hmm.
rapists to be
Hmm.
used. And that is now also being revealed. There's a complicity, there's a sickness in British society. And again, it comes back to freedom of speech to some extent as well, Don, because in the pursuit of trying to be socially acceptable and politically acceptable, people haven't had the courage to say what's going on.
Hmm.
And we've got to be brave. You've got to encourage unbrazen debate. Sorry, you've got to, forgive me, you've got to encourage, absolutely, you just got to have brazen
Uh-huh.
debate. You've just
Hmm.
got to go for it. You mustn't be worried about other people's sensibilities. We've got to call a spade a spade. And we've forgotten that. That doesn't mean you have to be offensive to people, but you've got to be able to make the case. And in
Hmm.
the pursuit of political correctness, we've set that aside. So again, it goes back to getting rid of the Human Rights Act, reacquainting ourselves with what it means to be British, reacquainting ourselves with what it means to be a criminal. Criminals must be punished. They do not deserve the protection of the state. They have become pariahs on the state if you're a criminal. You must
Hmm.
face justice. And if that involves being incarcerated, you must be incarcerated. If it involves
Hmm.
being deported, you must be deported. These are fundamental things which we have to reinstill in our establishment.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, and I think this is a common sentiment, that Parliament placates the Islamic community and migrant community in general is for the voting bloc, and I think that's why one of the reasons Nigel Farage speaks like he does now, because he understands that that's going to be impactful in an election. So how do you make sure, as Advance UK, as you grow, if you get members of Parliament, as you're coming up on a campaign, how do you make sure that your party doesn't become swayed by those electoral votes as well, and you just keep on with your message and don't change because you want the votes from this ethnicity or this group of people or the other?
Yeah, so I have set up, the party is constituted so that it includes what I call a college of uh, the best minds and the fearless speakers and the most capable people on our side of the debate. And the
Hmm.
college will comprise between 50 and 100 people. It will be elected by the membership, but it'll be a very slow turnover within the college. They'll only come up for election, only 10% of the college will come up for election in any given year. So it and the college, which will be a body of people that will not be remunerated by the party, no members of parliament, no elected officials can be in the college. You have to be unpaid, and you have to do it because you wish to do it, because you believe in the political philosophy of the party, and you want to protect the political philosophy of the party. These people will be the eyes, ears, conscience, intellectual ballast, and also the mechanism by which the political philosophy of our party will be passed on from generation to generation, making sure that our mission statement, which is nation state, freedom of speech, democracy, and equality under the law, will underpin all the policies and all the legislation that would ever emerge from Advance UK. And if the leadership of the party or its executive starts to deviate because they're pursuing votes or they've got some other hidden agenda which politicians often are prone to, it'll be the college who have no vested interest other than the protection of the party and its political philosophy.
Mhm.
It'll be up to the college to remove the leader, and they can do it.
Yeah. Gosh, I think that one of the other problems there that we're having in Western countries as well is the birth rate. How do you, as a party, or as what I think, and it's not just you guys; it's all Western countries. If you look at the
Yeah.
Islamic community, their birth rates are on the rise as always, and then ours is on the decline. So I think it's another problem. What do we do about that situation? You think from a perspective of government?
So, in my view, for decades, Western governments have prioritized the economy over constitution and culture. The economy's been everything. If the economy is doing all right, everything else will flow. And in the pursuit of having viable economies, or not viable economies, giving the best possible economic output in their minds, they have encouraged people into the workplace, husbands and wives. And then they've made the mistake of not rewarding, in the pursuit of encouraging everyone to work, they have removed the rewards that should go with having a family, with having children, with the essential protection of our own culture, which goes through. You only have a national culture and a local community culture, and if you've got family culture, it builds up from families. And in the pursuit of trying to make the economic machine fire on all cylinders, what we've done is break up the family. And in breaking up the family, we've removed the ability for parents easily to procreate,
Hmm.
and parents have become reliant on childcare, on effectively having to put extra bills and so on if they want children. And then the other thing that we've done in Western civilization, which has gone alongside this, is foist massive costs and massive taxation on those people who are working. So we've, first of all, broken up the incentive to have a family by bringing people into the workforce.
Hmm.
And then we've made it very, very difficult and expensive for them to have a family because of all the added costs that go with a family now that you are being so highly taxed and so on.
Hmm.
And so the rational indigenous populations, if you like, of Western civilization have decided, well, we're not going to have children because the only way to survive in the system that's been created for us is not to have children. And so you see a collapse in the birth rate. And
Hmm.
and then we've made the problem even worse, Don, by trying to fix the economic issues of a collapsing birth rate with mass migration and
Hmm.
all the things that you and I have just discussed.
Yeah.
And so, what we've got to do is find our way back to policies which promote family life, which encourage procreation, which encourage one member of, one of the spouses to be at home looking after the children. And that too will have economic consequences, but it's critical for the progression of Western civilization that we do this. And
Hmm.
it's not, it cannot come from giving people benefits to have children. You've got to give them incentives to have children because you do need people working. So we used to have something called a marriage tax allowance that was taken away. That needs to be reintroduced. Instead of giving people benefits when they have a child, we should reduce their taxes if they have a child, so that it's
Hmm.
only people who are working who actually get that benefit. You're not rewarding people for staying at home and having children. Are you with me? You're not creating
Yeah.
perverse incentives to have children and getting
Hmm.
those who actually are not working having children, which is precisely not what the economy needs. And also there should be tax breaks if one of the spouses in a married couple decides to stay at home and look after the children. There should be a tax break for that. And if you if you can use those kinds of mechanisms, coupled, of course, with getting, stopping this mass migration experiment, making it viable generally for domestic workers, British citizens, to earn a proper wage and to keep that wage. If you can do all of that, then people will start getting married again. They will start
Mhm.
procreating. And instead of Zia Yusuf and Nigel Farage occupying the matrimonial bed, we will have lots of couples occupying the matrimonial bed, doing what is great fun and
Yeah.
producing children for, for the future of our country.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that, man. Yeah, everything you're saying really is classic, the classic tactics of the Marxist left. You take away the family unit devotion to the family unit, you take away the church, take away devotion to God, which is really why something else you've said recently was I really liked. You said something along the lines. This is not verbatim. This is kind of me paraphrasing, but you wanted to somehow codify the Christendom of the UK or constitutionalize the Christendom of the UK. And damn those who come in. Not if they don't like it, don't come. You know what I mean? But you said something similar to
Yeah.
that recently.
Yeah.
I
So
found that
what?
refreshing.
So what I think I said was, so far our Christianity has been in our pockets, in certainly in the United Kingdom. I think the US is better than we are, but we carry our Christianity very lightly. We hide it. People, even people who are actually quite strongly Christian, they're shy about talking about their Christianity. It takes a back seat. Of
Hmm.
course, other muscular, less advanced cultures hold their religion on their sleeves, and they reveal it, and they wear all the trappings of their religion and so on. And what we've got to discover is the confidence. We've got to rediscover the confidence to be more on the front foot about our religious beliefs and to be proud of our Christianity and to be proud also, by the way, because it goes hand in hand, of our country, so that we sing our national anthem, we sing our hymns. We don't sing hymns in National Assembly anymore. We did when
Hmm.
I was a child, but they don't sing hymns anymore. When you sing a hymn, in the United Kingdom, you're connecting with two things. You're connecting with Christianity. You're also connecting with your country, because a lot of our hymns are born out of the struggles of the United Kingdom, and
Hmm.
they tell a story about the country. And like Jerusalem, for example, which is one of our most famous. It actually always moves me when I hear Jerusalem,
Can you
and
sing it
we've
for
got
me?
to. No, no, I couldn't even begin to sing. I'm not even going to
No,
try.
I'm teasing you, man. I'm teasing you.
But they play it before the rugby, and if there's anything that
Okay.
fires you up, and it's hearing Jerusalem, and we've got to reacquaint ourselves with all of that, and we've got to be much more. In the past I've used the word muscular. That may not be the right word, but we've got to be much more overt and self-confident in our religion, and we
Hmm.
must be purveyors of it. We must be more vocal in it, and
Hmm.
people who come to this country have to unequivocally be told, you're coming to a Christian country. This is what we sing. This is our flag. This is what we
Hmm.
believe in. Now, you
Hmm.
may be a Muslim. That's fine. We're not going to force you to change your religion, but you've got to practice your religion in a manner which is compatible with us.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I have an issue with the burqa, because the burqa represents, for me, it represents two things. It represents the outward expression of the inner repression of a woman, hiding her away for fear that males might find her attractive. It is the antithesis of the liberation that we have afforded our women folk, which has come about over hundreds of years.
It's a cloth
And the
prison.
other, it's a cloth prison. And the other reason I don't like the burqa is because it is an overt rejection of British culture. It's saying, we know women in this country are liberated. We know women in this country go to work, they wear short skirts, they do whatever. But we reject all of that, and this is us. And that is unacceptable to me. I find that really difficult to cope with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I really feel for the Muslim women, because they have to pretend as if it's a religious thing and it's empowering and they love it. But who could real how can a human being enjoy? I've seen these videos of the women in the full burqas. The
Yeah.
way when they lift the burqa up, they put the food in, the food just goes all. I'm like, how does a person live that way on a daily basis? I have sympathy for them. I really do, and I
Yeah.
hate it for them. But I just don't think that's any way for a human being to have to live, be forced to live at that.
But so I just want to talk about the burqa a second. So the knee-jerk reaction to the burqa is to say ban it, from our side of the debate. But
Uh,
actually, that's not the solution. Of course, we can ban it, but the solution is to have a settled culture where Christianity prevails, where it is evident to everyone in the country that they must adhere to our cultural norms, and that the burqa isn't welcome, and that they themselves decide that they're going to remove the burqa because they recognize they're in the United Kingdom and it's not compatible with British culture. That's the place we need to go to, where people remove the burqa voluntarily because they now realize they are in the United Kingdom, not that we
mhm.
ban it. Are you with me?
Yeah, yeah. What do you do about this? Because they have a lot of influence, and I know that legally they can't make decisions without actual British courts, but the Sharia courts. What do you do about them and the influence they have? Because I get the feeling they are making decisions for these communities that these communities feel are their legal decisions, whether the British courts. And I feel like the women in these instances, maybe the children, are really suffering the results of decisions made by Sharia courts. What do you do about those?
So, so I mean, I think there are a couple of aspects there. The first is that even if they're not true courts, they call themselves councils, I think, in order to
Hmm.
distinguish themselves from courts.
Hmm.
But even if they're not true courts, effectively what it is the mass practice of cultural norms which are antithetical to British culture. And so it
Hmm.
goes back to my initial point that, when you come to this country, you need to understand that this is not acceptable, that you have to buy into British culture. Now, a lot of Muslims who wish to practice Sharia law say, well, if you're going to ban Sharia councils, you should ban the practice of similar councils that the Jews have. Um, but there's a big difference between what the Jews do and what the Muslims are doing in this country, in that the Jews are not proselytizing. They're not exporting their ideology.
Hmm.
It's very to themselves, and there's no overt rejection of British culture by the Jews in this country, who are a very
Right.
tiny minority. So that's the first thing. It's a cultural issue, and I think that the council stand in opposition to British culture. And I think as long as these Sharia councils exist, we won't have a settled culture, and that's
Hmm.
critical. But the other thing is slightly more difficult to cope with. I think they use civil law effectively to give effect to Sharia law. So they will sign contracts which they can then prosecute through British law, contracts based on Sharia law, which they will then use through the British courts to enforce as civil through in a civil process. Are you with me? So it
Hmm.
won't be a statutory process, but they'll be able to make it happen. But essentially, it all goes back to culture, Don. It all goes back to culture. We must assert British culture. We've
No,
got to, yeah.
yeah, I agree totally. And a lot of folks talk about, Muslims getting elected to parliament. I believe you have three major boroughs now who have mayors with executive power in the UK. And a lot of folks talk about, they're worried about, but you don't really need a parliament full of Muslims to destroy the country. You just really need them as with executive power in localities all around Great Britain to make changes all over the whole country. You don't need federal change if you have them all around, peppered all throughout the country.
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't, of course, Islam is a very muscular religion. It's a religion which doesn't bend. It's a
That's right.
religion which doesn't tolerate free speech very easily because the word of God is the Quran. The Quran is the word of God. And so challenging the Quran is very problematic and, difficult for for Muslims to accept. And so it
Hmm.
makes it a very challenging religion for a society like ours, which we're used to questioning everything. If it
That's right.
moves, we question it, don't we? And that's diversity of thought as opposed to diversity of ethnicity, which is what our politicians seem to want to practice. But but I would take a slightly different view, with all the difficulties that come with the compatibility of Islam with Western society. I would take a different view. I would say, look, it's not about Islam. It's not about Hinduism. It's not about atheism. It's about British Christian roots.
Hmm.
And, you just have to accept all. I don't care whether you're a Muslim, this, that, and the other. I don't care where you're from. Don't care. This is the United Kingdom. Are you with me? So I think
Yeah.
there's the,
I think the problem is
the,
they still
uh,
they really believe it's a holy war, though. I really believe that because that's what their holy book tells them
yeah.
to dominate,
Well,
subjugate,
if
all the
you,
things you find in the Quran.
yeah. And so there are different kinds of Muslims. When I was a child, by the way, when I was born in Karachi, and until
Uh,
I left Karachi in 1979. I was
mhm.
13, and I was surprised by the direction of travel Islam had taken. When I woke up to Wahhabi Islam in 2001, which is after the Twin Towers, is when I really reacquainted myself with what had happened.
Uh,
How is it that Osama bin Laden blew up the Twin Towers? What I hadn't appreciated, having left Pakistan in 1979, was that Islam right across the Middle East, and particularly bizarrely in the United Kingdom and other parts of Europe, has become a very fundamentalist form of Islam. When I
mhm.
was born, Islam was going through a pretty enlightened period.
Did
If
you
you
come from
look
a
back,
Muslim family originally, or was your
so
family
no,
Muslim?
my dad is what I would call a lapsed Muslim,
Uh-huh.
and my mother is white, Anglo-Saxon,
Okay.
born in Isleworth, blonde, blue-eyed
Christian or
lady.
no?
No, Christian,
Okay.
very Christian,
Okay.
and dad is a lapsed Muslim, and we celebrated Christian and Easter and so on at home. Um, when I was brought up. But if you look at all the Pathé films of India, Iran, Iraq, if you look at those black and white films from the 1950s and 60s, all the women have their hair loose, all the women are wearing dresses, the men are wearing suits. The
Hmm.
trappings and the cultural impact of the West is evident to be seen everywhere, and it was a very very enlightened form of Islam. And Islam then was not muscular. Islam was held in people's pockets. It was a private religion. And then Wahhabism was exported by Saudi Arabia in the 80s. And the reason I didn't see it coming, or I didn't see it evolve, was because I was in England. I was at boarding school and then university, and I didn't know what was really happening. But I woke up to it in 2001, and I only recently really fully understood how Islam has changed in the last 30, 40 years. Islam is now a much more fundamentalist religion than it was in the 70s. It's
Hmm.
regressed from a Western perspective. And
Hmm.
the form of Islam that is practiced in the United Kingdom is of a particularly fundamentalist nature. We have, for example, Donna, you probably know this. The UAE, which is a Muslim country, has proscribed Muslim groups in the United that originated and practice in the United Kingdom. The UAE, the United Arab Emirates, sees Muslim groups in the UK as effectively terroristic organizations, which
Hmm.
we allowed to go about their business as if it's normal business in the UK. The UK, in its desire to be so welcoming and generous and kind, and the Human Rights Act and the Equalities Act, progressive discrimination and everything else, has become a hotbed for fundamentalist Islam. And many Muslims would reject it. But again, the challenge is, if you say you're going to reject a fundamental, if you're a Muslim and you reject fundamentalist Islam, you
Hmm.
then become a target. So
Hmm.
very few Muslims are prepared to do it. Are you with me? So
Yeah.
you end up in a deadlock where you can't escape the fundamentalism. And people like Farage, many people rightly call out extremist Islam. They say extremist Islam is unacceptable. Actually, it's fundamentalist Islam that's unacceptable. It's more basic, literally more basic than obviously extremism is unacceptable. That
Hmm.
doesn't even merit a comment. But the more important, more pertinent observation is that Islam tends towards fundamentalism, and fundamentalism is unacceptable
Right.
because it's a hop and a skip away from extremism. And
Yeah, I
and we
always
need to
thought those
remember that.
extremists were actually the extremists fall along the line of the more orthodox Muslims, whereas the secular Muslims tend to be the more peaceful ones. That's the way I've always looked at it. Do you
Yeah,
feel that way?
absolutely. Absolutely right. But of course, to use the expression secular Muslim is a contradiction in terms.
Hmm.
You know, but there are Muslims like my father. You know, my father is a product of British Imperial India. That's what my
Hmm.
father is a product of. And Islam in those days, when my father was brought up, was a very relaxed form of Islam because it had to rub along with Hindus. It had to rub along with effectively the exported British culture that we had and so on in the subcontinent, and it was in, as I say, in the back seat. So he's what I would call, what you might call, a secular Muslim. You know,
Hmm.
he's it's certainly removed from the apparatus of the state.
Right.
You know, and he wouldn't even begin to advocate Sharia law. He drinks like a fish, apart from anything else. And when we were children, we used to go to Chinese restaurant, and we'd order spare ribs because we all love spare ribs. And he used
Pork
to
spare
say,
ribs.
yeah, yeah, and he used to say, don't tell me, I don't want to hear where these came from."
He probably loves bacon too. Then I'm guessing because you like ribs, you like the pork.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
I
the
want
world has
to.
changed, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Oh, it certainly has. I want to have I want to look at something or talk about something that's a little bit more fun. Not that I haven't had a great time, but I know you had to have saw or heard about Trump's visit to the UK this weekend. Since we were talking about the mayors and all of those things, Muslim mayors and everything he said about Sadiq Khan, I have a clip I want to play for you, and just get your reaction to it real quick.
But Europe has a big immigration problem. But they also liked when I said that they have one of the worst mayors anywhere in the world in London. He's a horrible mayor, nasty guy, stupid guy in my opinion, but he's a nasty man. And I want nothing to do with him, but I didn't think it was a big statement. And so many people said, thank you for saying that. He's a bad guy. Khan is his name, I guess. He's done a lousy job, I can tell you that. A terrible
Mr.
mayor.
President, Mr.
No, but
President.
people liked it so much when I said that.
Will you visit London during the state visit?
I will. I'm not a fan of your mayor. I think he's done a terrible job, the mayor of London. But a nasty person. I think he's done. I think no. I think
He's a friend of mine, right?
no. I think he's done a terrible job. But I would certainly visit London. Yeah.
So I don't think you could contrast two leaders more than the last bit of that clip where he's just obliterating Sadiq Khan, and Keir Starmer's like, "Oh no, 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 he's my friend." What do you think about that interaction there?
Well, I loved the whole interaction. That you played a clip, but I watched the whole thing, and I absolutely loved the way, basically, Trump schooled Starmer, and
Yeah.
he told Starmer what you need to do to have a successful um, country and what you need to
Uh-huh.
do if you want to be re-elected. And it was the opposite of everything Starmer is doing. And you
Uh-huh.
could just see Starmer look absolutely blooming gobsmacked. He was sitting there thinking, "Man,
He's like, I can't believe
everything
he's
he
saying
wants me
this
to do
right
is the
in front of me.
opposite of what I'm doing."
Oh God, I tell you, man, I really think they broke the mold when they made President Trump, when they made Donald Trump. He's just it's so refreshing as a leader to me, just to see him speak his mind like
Well,
that.
that
He doesn't
was,
care who's there.
I've seen a lot of President Trump speak. That was one of the best when he
Oh, it was
schooled
amazing.
Starmer the other day.
It was
Yeah.
it was
And Starmer
truly
just sat
amazing.
there and, he said, "Look, give your people cheap energy, drill, use your North Sea gas. You
Yeah,
tax
drill baby
the fossil
drill.
fuel companies too much. Yeah, drill, baby, drill. Come on, put up your borders. uh, provide security, provide law and order. These are very simple things, and you will be
Yeah.
re-elected. And,
Right.
and Starmer was sitting there going, but that's the opposite of what I'm doing.
Well, I mean, what can you say? I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, what is Starmer going to say? I get, President Trump's always very diplomatic. So he knows what's going on with Starmer. He knows what's going on with all these world leaders, the Macrons of the world. But he's going to be diplomatic. But the fact the fact that he said that about Sadiq Khan right there in front of Keir Starmer was just amazing to me. It's really something I really like to see.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll
So
just before we finish on that, I just
yeah,
say
go
I
ahead.
completely agree with him about Sadiq Khan. He's a
Mhm.
poisonous little man who's been so damaging to London.
So much so. It's really, gosh. Do you think is can he be reelected? When's his next the next election cycle? Do you have terms for your mayors there?
I
I'm
can't
not sure
remember
about
now.
that.
Yeah, we do have terms. I think it's 4 years.
Mhm.
I think it's 4 years. I may be wrong.
But how many
But
terms can they run?
he,
Is there an amount of terms they can
I
run?
think they can just. I think they can keep going. I don't
Okay.
think there's a number of terms.
Okay.
You'll have to check it out after this interview. But we might have Sadiq Khan going into his old age, which would be a disaster.
Oh my gosh, he's ruined London and really all the boroughs, all the surrounding areas because they kind of fall in line with what London does. Just like our major cities here. Um, you really when you get a big leftist city in the States, or I don't know how it operates where you're at, but they kind of annex the suburbs around them as well with their policies because they subsidize a lot of the suburbs. So if the suburbs don't fall
Yeah,
in line with what the larger metropolitan area wants, and they can defund schools, busing, things like that. So all these suburbs around the major metropolitan areas are affected by the policies
yeah.
and laws within the major cities. So I'm sure that's the case
I
in
mean, I
London as
would
well.
frankly. I mean, left to if we had a clean, ability to do whatever we wanted, I would abolish the mayoralties. We don't need mayors. We need central government and local authorities. We've got enough bodies doing. Margaret Thatcher abolished the Greater London Authority. It was absolutely the
Uh,
right thing to do. And then Bloomin' Tony Blair brought it back. Uh,
mm,
the GLC, sorry, not the authority, the Great London Corporation or whatever. I can't remember what it stood for. But anyway, she abolished it. And Tony Blair brought it back. And
mhm.
we don't need it. We don't need it. We've got too many layers of people doing this, that, and the other. Cut the costs.
Yeah. No, I
There's
agree
also a
with you
minister.
totally.
There's a minister. There's also a minister for London. There is a minister for London. So let him do the job.
What is the minister's role?
Well, presumably to keep an eye on Sadiq Khan and the things that he's failing at.
He's not doing a very good job, is he? I think we need a new
Yeah.
minister as well. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Ben, it's been a blast as always, man. Well, we always have a good time when you're on. But before we go, I want to give you a chance just to give your spiel about the Advanced UK. I'm sure you're going to be campaigning up until the next election. So, what would you like to say? Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they join Advanced UK?
Yeah. Well, I've set a target, as I mentioned, of 30,000 members. We're,
Mhm.
we're nearly halfway there. It's vital that people, if they believe in nation state, freedom of speech, democracy, and equality under the law, if they want a proud, independent, prosperous United Kingdom, there is only one party to back, frankly. None of the other parties have our agenda, including Reform UK. So back Advance UK. Help me get to 30,000 members. The way you can do that is by going to www.advanceuk.org.uk. That's www.advanceuk.org.uk. For 10 quid, you can sign up. And if we get to 30,000 members, I will donate £100,000 myself to the party. We will be fully capitalized up and we'll be able to absolutely take the political ground by storm. And that is what we're going to do. We are going to stand unashamedly for the principles in which we believe. We will not bend, and we will keep going until we've delivered for this country and its people.
Well, you've made a great case for Advance UK today, and as always, like I said, it's great to have you. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for coming on,
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having me.
and thank you all for watching. This has been The Real Beef. I'm Don Keith.
The real